The dusty streets of Fort Garland, Colorado, ran red with the blood of prejudice in the summer of 1878, but not in the way most folks expected. 23-year-old Vincent Zimmer had seen plenty of cruelty in his years working cattle drives and breaking horses, but nothing prepared him for the sight of the young woman being dragged through the dirt by her own stepbrother outside the general store that sweltering June afternoon. She stumbled and fell, her worn cotton dress catching on the wooden planks of the boardwalk. The man yanked her up by her arm with such force that Vincent heard the pop of her shoulder joint from across the street. What struck him most was not her silence, though she made no sound of protest or pain, but the way every person on that street turned away from her suffering as if it were as ordinary as the Colorado sun beating down on their heads. Vincent crossed the street in 4 long strides, his boots kicking up dust devils in his wake. He was tall, broader through the shoulders than most men, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of creek water after a storm. His hand came down on the stepbrother's wrist before the man could strike the woman again. "That is enough," Vincent said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that came from years of commanding respect from both horses and men. The stepbrother, a weasel-faced man with tobacco-stained teeth, spat at Vincent's feet. "This ain't your concern, Drifter. This worthless creature is my burden to bear, seeing as how my mother married her father before they both had the decency to die and leave me with her." Vincent looked at the young woman for the first time, really looked at her. She was perhaps 20 years old, with long dark hair that had come loose from its braid, and eyes the color of deep amber. Those eyes held a sharp intelligence that seemed at odds with the way everyone treated her. She met his gaze directly, and he saw no plea for help there, only a weary resignation that made his chest tighten with an emotion he could not name. "She is a person, not a burden," Vincent said evenly, "and I suggest you unhand her before I make you." A small crowd had gathered now, drawn by the promise of violence the way flies were drawn to honey. The stepbrother, whose name Vincent would later learn was Marcus Cole, puffed up his chest like a rooster in a henhouse. "She cannot talk, cannot tell no one nothing. She is simple in the head, useless as teats on a bull. I have half a mind to sell her to the first mining camp that will take her. Let her earn her keep on her back, since she cannot do nothing else proper." Vincent's fist connected with Marcus Cole's jaw before he made the conscious decision to throw the punch. The man went down hard, spitting blood and a tooth into the Colorado dirt. Vincent stood over him, every muscle in his body coiled and ready. "You will not lay another hand on her," Vincent said, his voice deadly calm. "You will not sell her. You will walk away and consider yourself lucky I do not finish what I started." Marcus scrambled to his feet, his eyes darting between Vincent and the gathered crowd. "You want the mute? You can have her. She eats more than she is worth anyway. But when you tire of trying to teach a dog to talk, do not come crying to me." With that, Marcus Cole slunk away, leaving Vincent standing in the middle of the street with a young woman he did not know and had just acquired like a piece of livestock. The crowd dispersed, already moving on to the next bit of gossip. Only the woman remained, looking at Vincent with those intelligent amber eyes that seemed to see straight through to his bones. Vincent rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly aware of the magnitude of what he had just done. He had no home beyond the boarding house where he rented a room. He had been planning to move on in a few days, head south toward New Mexico territory, where he heard a ranch needed skilled horse breakers. Now he stood responsible for another human being's welfare. The woman brushed the dust from her dress with methodical movements, wincing slightly as she rotated her shoulder. She looked at Vincent, then gestured toward the general store, then back to him with a questioning tilt of her head. "I do not understand," Vincent admitted. She tried again, this time miming the action of carrying something heavy, then pointing to the store once more. Her frustration was evident in the set of her jaw, the way her hands moved faster and sharper. "You work there?" Vincent guessed. "You have to get back to work?" Her face lit up like sunrise over the Sangre de Cristo mountains, and she nodded emphatically. She pressed her hands together in a gesture of thanks, then turned to go into the store. "Wait," Vincent called out. She stopped, turned back. "What is your name?" She considered this, then picked up a stick from the ground and smoothed out a patch of dirt. With careful, precise movements, she wrote 4 letters. D-A-L-E. "Dale," Vincent said aloud. "Dale Cole?" She shook her head firmly and scratched out the Cole. She wrote another name slowly. Carson. Dale Carson, Vincent repeated. Your father's name. She nodded, and something in her expression told him how much that distinction mattered to her. She pointed at him with a questioning look. Vincent Zimmer, he said. Most folks call me Vince. Dale smiled then, a small tentative thing that transformed her whole face. She touched her hand to her heart, then extended it toward him in a gesture that felt almost ceremonial. He understood. She was thanking him. Truly thanking him. Where will you go tonight? Vincent asked. After work? Her smile faded. She shrugged, a motion that spoke volumes about the precariousness of her situation. She made a sleeping gesture, then pointed vaguely toward the edge of town. You have been sleeping rough, Vincent said, not a question but a statement, since your stepbrother threw you out. Another nod, this one accompanied by a slight lift of her chin. Pride, Vincent realized. She had pride even in her desperation. The boarding house where I stay has rooms, Vincent said, making a decision he hoped he would not regret. I will speak to Mrs. Patterson. She is fair-minded. If you have money for rent, she will not care about the rest. Dale reached into her pocket and pulled out a few coins, barely enough for a week's rent if Mrs. Patterson felt generous. But Vincent saw the way Dale held them, as if they represented all the security in the world. The afternoon sun climbed higher as Dale returned to her work in the general store, and Vincent set about rearranging his life. Mrs. Patterson, a widow of 50 years who ran her boarding house with military precision, listened to his request with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She cannot speak? Mrs. Patterson asked, her hands busy with kneading bread dough that would become dinner for her guests. No, madam, but she can hear just fine, and she is plenty smart, writes clearly. I do not think she has anywhere else to go. Mrs. Patterson studied Vincent with the intensity of a woman who had seen too many men make promises they could not keep. And what is she to you, Mr. Zimmer? You planning to make an honest woman of her? Vincent felt heat creep up his neck. I only just met her an hour ago, Mrs. Patterson. I am trying to keep her from starving or worse, nothing more than that. Mrs. Patterson said, but her expression softened. There is a small room in the attic. Gets hot in summer, cold in winter, but it has a good lock on the door and a window that catches the morning light. I will rent it to her for what she can pay, and she can work off the rest, helping me with laundry and such. But you tell her this, Vincent Zimmer, I run a respectable house. No men in her room, no her in yours. Clear? Yes, madam, clear as Colorado spring water. When Dale finished her shift at the general store that evening, Vincent was waiting outside. The surprise on her face told him she had not expected him to return. He explained Mrs. Patterson's offer, and Dale's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. She grabbed his hand and squeezed it so tightly he could feel every callus on her palm, every bit of hard work she had ever done. The attic room was small, as Mrs. Patterson had warned, with a sloped ceiling and walls that had been whitewashed so many times the wood grain barely showed through. But it had a narrow bed with a corn husk mattress, a washstand with a chipped basin, and a trunk for belongings. Dale stood in the doorway, looking at it all as if Vincent had handed her a palace. She turned to him and placed both hands over her heart, then pointed to him. Thank you, the gesture said as clearly as spoken words. You are welcome, Vincent said. Get some rest. Tomorrow we can figure out the rest. But figuring out the rest proved more complicated than Vincent anticipated. Over the next few days, he learned that Dale's silence had created a wall between her and the rest of Fort Garland that was nearly impenetrable. People talked over her, around her, through her, but never to her. At the general store where she worked, she was given the most menial tasks, sweeping, hauling crates, scrubbing floors. The owner, Mr. Hendricks, paid her half what he paid his other workers and seemed to consider it charity. Vincent found himself watching Dale more than he intended. He noticed the way she moved through the world, always observing, always thinking. She had developed an elaborate system of gestures and expressions that conveyed meaning, but most people did not have the patience to learn her language. They saw her silence and assumed emptiness behind it. One evening, Vincent sat on the boarding house porch, working saddle soap into a leather bridle that had seen better days. Dale emerged from the house carrying a basket of mending that Mrs. Patterson had given her. She settled into a rocking chair near Vincent. her needle flashing in the lamplight from the window. Vincent watched her work for a moment, then said, "Tell me about your parents, your real parents." Dale looked up, surprised. She set down her mending and thought for a moment. Then she stood and went inside, returning a minute later with paper and a pencil. She wrote quickly, her handwriting neat and flowing despite the poor light. "My mother died when I was 7. Fever. My father was a saddle maker, very skilled. He loved music even though I could not make any. He married Marcus's mother when I was 13. She was not kind. They both died 3 years ago. Wagon accident." Vincent read the words twice. "Your father was a saddle maker? Did he teach you the craft?" Dale nodded enthusiastically. She wrote again, "He taught me everything. I am good at it, but no one will let me try." "Why not?" Dale's expression turned bitter. She wrote, "Because I cannot talk to customers, because they think I am simple, because I am a woman. Pick your reason." Vincent felt anger kindle in his chest again, the same anger that had made him punch Marcus Cole. "Show me your work," he said. "I am a decent judge of leather craft." The next morning, Dale brought Vincent a small leather pouch she had made from scraps. The stitching was so fine it was almost invisible, the edges beveled and burnished to a smooth finish that spoke of countless hours of practice. Vincent turned it over in his hands, impressed despite himself. "This is excellent work," he said honestly. "Better than most I have seen." Dale's face glowed with pleasure at the praise. She wrote quickly, "I want to work leather, not scrub floors, but no one will hire me." An idea began forming in Vincent's mind, crazy and impractical, but stubbornly refusing to leave. "What if we went into business together?" he said slowly. "I know horses, you know leather, saddles, bridles, tack. There is always need for good leather work, especially in ranch country." Dale stared at him, as if he had suggested they fly to the moon. She wrote, "Why would you do that? You do not know me." "I know enough," Vincent said. "I know you work hard. I know you have skill and intelligence. I know you deserve better than what this town has given you. And I will be honest with you, Dale. I am tired of drifting. I am 23 years old, and I have nothing to show for it but calluses and saddle sores. Maybe it is time to build something that lasts." Dale looked down at her hands, rough and scarred from work. When she looked back up at Vincent, there was something different in her eyes. Hope, perhaps, or the beginning of trust. She wrote, "I have $17 saved. It is yours if you are serious." "Keep your money," Vincent said. "We will need a workshop, tools, leather, and time to build a reputation. I have about $80 saved. It is not much, but it is a start. We can work out of a shed, take small jobs at first. You do the detailed work. I will handle the customers and heavier construction. We split the profits even." "Even?" Dale wrote, underlining the word twice. "You would give me half? You do half the work, you get half the pay. Seems fair to me." Dale stood abruptly and paced to the edge of the porch, her arms wrapped around herself. Vincent waited, letting her think. He had learned in working with horses that sometimes the best thing to do was be still and let them come to you. Finally, Dale turned back. She wrote one word. "Yes." They shook hands on it, her palm small and warm in his. Vincent felt the significance of the moment settle over him like a weight. He had just tied his future to a woman he barely knew, a woman the rest of the world considered worthless. He should have felt afraid. Instead, he felt something like peace. Finding a workshop proved easier than expected. On the edge of town stood an old livery stable that had been abandoned when the owner died and his sons moved to Denver. The building was weathered and missing half its roof, but the structure was sound. The owner's widow, who lived in Santa Fe, was happy to rent it for next to nothing, just to have someone keeping squatters out. Vincent and Dale spent 2 weeks making the place habitable. They patched the roof with new shingles that Vincent bought at cost from a sawmill outside town. They swept out years of accumulated dirt and bird droppings. They built a workbench from reclaimed lumber and installed shutters on the windows to control the light. Dale drew plans for organizing the space, showing Vincent where to put the leather storage, the tools, the finishing area. He followed her directions, learning quickly that she had a mind for organization that far surpassed his own. Word spread through Fort Garland that the drifter cowboy and the mute girl were starting some kind of business together. The gossip ranged from the merely curious to the outright scandalous. Mrs. Patterson, to her credit, defended Dale's reputation fiercely, informing anyone who would listen that Dale Carson was a good Christian girl who worked harder than any three men, and that Vincent Zimmer was a perfect gentleman. Their first customer came on a hot afternoon in July. A rancher named Tom Willis rode in with a bridle that had broken at the bit rings. It was a simple repair, but Willis had heard that Vincent knew his way around horses. "Need this fixed," Willis said, dropping the bridle on the workbench. His eyes slid to Dale, who was in the corner working on cutting leather for a saddle project. "That the mute girl? She working for you?" "With me," Vincent corrected. "She is my business partner." Willis snorted. "Partner? What kind of partnership can you have with someone who cannot talk?" Vincent felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice level. "The kind where I do not have to listen to foolish questions. This will take about an hour. You can wait or come back." While Vincent worked on the bridle repair, he was acutely aware of Willis watching Dale. She was cutting leather with a curved knife, her movements precise and confident. She had tied her hair back with a strip of rawhide, and a smudge of leather dye marked her cheek. She looked, Vincent thought, like she belonged exactly where she was. "How much?" Willis asked when Vincent handed him the repaired bridle. 50 cents. Willis pulled out the coins, still watching Dale. "She always that quiet?" "She cannot speak," Vincent said flatly. "But she hears fine, and she understands everything you say. You might remember that." Dale looked up then, meeting Willis's gaze directly. The rancher had the grace to look embarrassed. He nodded to her, a gesture that might have been an apology, and left. After he was gone, Dale came to stand beside Vincent at the workbench. She wrote, "Thank you for defending me. Most people do not bother." "Most people are fools," Vincent said. He surprised himself with the vehemence in his voice. "You are worth 10 of them." Dale looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her expression. Then she smiled, that small sunrise smile that was becoming familiar, and went back to her work. As summer deepened into August, their business grew slowly but steadily. Vincent proved to be right about one thing. There was always need for good leather work. Cowboys came in needing saddle repairs. Ranchers needed new harnesses for their teams. The town doctor needed a new medical bag. Each job, no matter how small, Dale and Vincent completed with meticulous care. They developed a rhythm in their work that felt natural, almost instinctive. Vincent would consult with the customer, assess the job, discuss price and timeline. Then he would turn to Dale, and through a combination of words, gestures, and the kind of understanding that transcends language, they would plan the work together. Dale's hands were more skilled than his at the fine work, the stitching, the tooling, the detail work that made their pieces stand out. Vincent handled the heavier construction, the cutting of thick leather, the assembly of larger pieces. They also developed ways of communicating that belonged only to them. A tilt of Dale's head meant she had a question. A particular gesture with her hands, palms up and fingers spread, meant she was uncertain and wanted Vincent's opinion. When she tapped her temple twice, it meant she had an idea she wanted to share. Vincent found himself reading her expressions the way he read horses, the tension in her shoulders that meant she was frustrated, the slight narrowing of her eyes that meant she was concentrating deeply, the way her whole face softened when she was pleased with a piece of work. One evening in late August, they worked late finishing a custom saddle for a rancher who was willing to pay top dollar. The lamplight cast long shadows across the workshop, and the air smelled of leather and neat's foot oil. Vincent was beveling the edges of the saddle skirts while Dale worked on tooling an intricate pattern into the cantle. "How did you learn to do that?" Vincent asked, watching her hands move. "The tooling, I mean." Dale paused and reached for her ever-present paper and pencil. She wrote, "My father. He said I had good hands, patient hands. He said being unable to speak meant I learned to say things other ways, through the leather." Vincent studied the pattern she was creating, a flowing design of leaves and vines that seemed to move in the lamplight. He was right. "You have got a gift." Dale set down her tools and wrote again. "No one ever saw it before. They only saw what I could not do, never what I could." "Their loss," Vincent said. He meant it. Over the past 2 months, he had come to rely on Dale's judgment, her skill, her quiet, steady presence. More than that, he had come to look forward to their days together. He woke each morning eager to get to the workshop, to see what Dale would create that day, to share the small victories and frustrations of building something together. He was, he realized with a start, that made him nearly cut himself with his knife, starting to care for her in a way that went beyond business partnership or even friendship. The realization unsettled him. He had known her less than 3 months. She was his business partner, dependent on him for her livelihood and safety. It would be wrong to pursue anything more, would not it? It would be taking advantage. But then Dale looked up and smiled at him, and Vincent felt something in his chest crack open like spring ice on a frozen river. September brought cooler weather and a crisis that tested everything they had built. Tom Willis, the rancher who had been their first customer, returned with a proposition. He needed a complete set of tack for his operation. 6 saddles, 8 bridles, assorted reins and harnesses. It was more work than Dale and Vincent had ever taken on. Easily 3 months of steady labor, but Willis was willing to pay $300, money that would secure their business for the foreseeable future. There was one catch. Willis wanted the work done in 2 months, before the first heavy snows made traveling between his ranch and town difficult. Vincent looked at Dale after Willis left. "Can we do it?" Dale chewed her lip, thinking. She wrote, "If we work every day, all day, no other jobs, it is risky. What if something goes wrong? Then we lose the contract and probably our reputation," Vincent admitted. "But if we pull it off, we are set. We can expand, maybe hire help. It is a gamble." Dale looked around the workshop they had built together, at the tools they had carefully acquired, at the sign Vincent had painted that read, "Zimmer and Carson, fine leather work." She wrote, "Let us do it." The next 2 months were the hardest Vincent had ever worked, and he suspected the same was true for Dale. They arrived at the workshop before dawn and worked until their hands cramped and their eyes burned from lamplight. Dale's fingers bled from pushing the needle through heavy leather, and Vincent's back ached from hunching over the workbench. But, piece by piece, the order came together. They learned each other's limits and capabilities during those grueling weeks. Vincent discovered that Dale had a stubborn streak that matched his own, refusing to quit even when exhaustion made her hands shake. Dale learned that Vincent had a perfectionist's eye that would not accept anything less than their best work, even when time pressure mounted. They also learned to lean on each other. When Vincent grew frustrated with a complicated bit of construction, Dale would gently take the work from his hands and show him a simpler approach. When Dale's hands gave out from hours of stitching, Vincent would brew strong coffee and sit with her while she rested, telling her stories of his years on cattle drives to distract her from the pain. It was during one of these rest periods in early October, with autumn painting the aspens gold on the mountainsides, that things shifted between them. Dale sat on a stool, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, her eyes closed with exhaustion. Vincent found himself studying her face in the lamplight, the curve of her cheek, the long lashes that cast shadows below her eyes, the way her mouth curved slightly even in repose, as if she were dreaming of something pleasant. "Dale," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. In the quiet workshop, with autumn wind whistling through the cracks in the walls, Vincent felt the weight of all the words he had been carrying inside him for weeks. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and you need to know you can say no. It will not affect our partnership or your place here. You will always have that, I promise." Dale set down her coffee cup, her expression suddenly alert and wary. She reached for her paper. "Do not write yet," Vincent said. "Just listen, please." She nodded, her amber eyes fixed on his face. Vincent took a breath. "I have been thinking about you more than I should, not just as my partner, but as more than that. I find myself watching for your smile. I look forward to our mornings together. When you are pleased with a piece of work, I feel proud like it is my own accomplishment. When someone treats you poorly, I want to break things." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with his inability to express what he felt. "I am making a mess of this. What I'm trying to say is that somewhere along the way, I started falling for you, Dale Carson. And I needed you to know." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of wind and the distant bark of a dog. Dale's face had gone very still, unreadable. Vincent felt his heart hammering against his ribs. He had made a mistake. He had ruined everything. He should have kept his mouth shut. Then Dale reached for her paper and wrote, her hand shaking slightly. "I do not know how to do this. No one has ever wanted me before. Not like that." "I want you," Vincent said quietly. "Not despite your silence, not even because of it. Just you, as you are. But I will not push. If you need time, if you do not feel the same, that is all right. I just could not keep pretending I only see you as a business partner." Dale wrote again. "I am afraid. What if I am not enough? What if you realize I am the burden everyone says I am?" Vincent moved to kneel in front of her stool, taking her hands gently in his. They were rough and scarred, beautiful hands that created beauty. "You are not a burden," he said fiercely. "You are the best thing that has happened to me in longer than I can remember. You are smart and talented and strong. Anyone who cannot see that is blind." Dale's eyes filled with tears that spilled down her cheeks. She pulled one hand free and touched Vincent's face, her fingertips tracing the line of his jaw with a tenderness that made his breath catch. Then she leaned forward and kissed him, soft and tentative and perfect. When they pulled apart, Dale was smiling through her tears. She wrote, "I have been falling for you too. I was just too afraid to hope." Vincent kissed her again, longer this time, pouring all the words he did not have into the gesture. When they finally broke apart, both of them were grinning like fools. "We still have 4 saddles to finish," Vincent said, his forehead resting against hers. Dale laughed, the sound a soft exhale of air that Vincent felt more than heard. She wrote, "Then we should get back to work. But Vincent?" "Yes?" "Thank you for learning my language." They finished the Willis order with 3 days to spare, delivering 6 saddles, 8 bridles, and assorted tack that represented the finest work either of them had ever done. Tom Willis inspected each piece with a critical eye, then paid them in full with a grunt of approval that might as well have been a standing ovation. "You two do good work," Willis said. "I will be recommending you to other ranchers." As he rode away with the tack loaded on a pack mule, Dale and Vincent stood in the doorway of their workshop, watching him go. Vincent put his arm around Dale's shoulders, and she leaned into him with a contentment that felt like coming home. News of their relationship spread through Fort Garland faster than a prairie fire. Most folks seemed merely bemused that the drifter cowboy had fallen for the mute girl. A few were genuinely happy for them, particularly Mrs. Patterson, who declared that she had seen it coming from the first day. Some were predictably cruel, making comments about what use Vincent could possibly have for a woman who could not talk. Vincent punched only one man over such a comment, a drunk cowboy who suggested that at least Dale could not nag. The man went down hard and did not get up for several minutes. After that, people were more careful about what they said within Vincent's hearing. Winter arrived in earnest in November, bringing snow that blanketed Fort Garland in white and turned the Sangre de Cristo Mountains into a painting of shadow and ice. Business slowed with the weather, giving Dale and Vincent time to focus on each other and on planning their future. They began courting properly, or as properly as 2 people with limited free time could manage. Vincent took Dale to church socials, where she was grudgingly accepted because Mrs. Patterson championed her. They walked together in the evenings when the snow crunched underfoot, and their breath made clouds in the cold air. They shared meals at the boarding house, sitting close together at the table while other boarders talked around them. Dale taught Vincent more of her gesture language, the intricate signs she had developed over years of silence. He learned the sign for love, both hands over the heart, then extended outward. He learned the sign for home, hands forming a roof shape, then touching the heart. He learned her sign for his name, a V shape with 2 fingers drawn over the heart. Vincent, in turn, shared stories of his past with Dale. He told her about growing up in Kansas, the son of a farmer who drank too much, and a mother who had died when Vincent was 12. He told her about running away at 15, working his way west through a series of ranches and cattle drives. He told her about the loneliness of a drifter's life, always moving, never belonging. "Until I met you," he said one evening as they sat in the workshop, ostensibly working, but mostly just enjoying each other's company. "Now I feel like I have found where I'm supposed to be." Dale wrote, "Me too. For so long I felt like I was invisible, like I was shouting but no one could hear me. But you hear me, Vincent. You always hear me." On Christmas Eve, Vincent gave Dale a present he had been working on in secret for weeks. A leather-bound journal with her initials tooled into the cover and pages of fine paper, perfect for writing. Dale gave him a new belt she had made, the leather tooled with a pattern of running horses that took his breath away with its beauty. They sat together in the workshop that night, a small fire burning in the stove, snow falling softly outside the windows. Vincent held Dale close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, and thought about the miracle of finding her, or perhaps of her finding him. Either way, it was the best Christmas of his life. "Marry me," Vincent said into the quiet workshop. He had not planned to propose, not then, not without a ring or a proper romantic gesture, but the words came out anyway, true and simple. Dale pulled back to look at him, her eyes wide with surprise. She reached for her paper, but Vincent caught her hand. "You do not have to answer now," he said quickly. "I know it has only been 6 months. I know we are still building our business, still figuring things out. But I am sure about this, Dale. I am sure about you. I want to marry you, build a life with you, grow old with you. Whenever you are ready, if you are ever ready, I will be here." Dale touched his face with trembling fingers. Then she took her paper and wrote simply, "Yes, now. I do not want to wait. I have waited my whole life to be seen, to be wanted, to belong somewhere. I want to be your wife, Vincent Zimmer. I want it more than anything." Vincent kissed her with a joy that bordered on reverence. They would face challenges, he knew. The world would not suddenly become kind to a woman who could not speak, or a couple who defied conventional expectations. But they would face those challenges together, and that made all the difference. They married in January of 1879 in the small church in Fort Garland, with Mrs. Patterson and Tom Willis standing as witnesses. The preacher, Reverend Thompson, initially balked at marrying a woman who could not speak her vows. Dale solved the problem by writing her vows on paper in advance, then signing them with her full name while Vincent spoke his aloud. "I, Dale Carson, take you, Vincent Zimmer, to be my husband," the Reverend read from Dale's paper. "I promise to stand beside you in joy and hardship, to share my silence and my heart, to build a life with you that honors the gift you have given me, the gift of being seen and valued for who I am. I will love you with every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of my life." There was not a dry eye in the church, even among those who had come more out of curiosity than goodwill. Vincent spoke his vows looking directly at Dale, his voice steady and sure. "I, Vincent Zimmer, take you, Dale Carson, to be my wife. I promise to listen with more than my ears, to see with more than my eyes, to love you with more than words can express. You have taught me that silence can speak volumes, that patience and observation reveal truths that noise obscures. I will spend my life learning your language and teaching you mine until there is no difference between them." When the Reverend pronounced them married, Vincent kissed his wife while the small congregation applauded. Dale cried happy tears that soaked into Vincent's shirt, and he did not care one bit. They moved out of the boarding house and into a small cabin they rented on the edge of town, close enough to walk to the workshop, but far enough for privacy. The cabin was simple: 2 rooms, a stone fireplace, windows that looked out toward the mountains. Dale made it a home with curtains she sewed from flour sacks and wildflowers she pressed between book pages during the summer. Their life settled into a pattern that felt right: mornings in the workshop, afternoons taking care of the business side of their operation, evenings at home together. They cooked simple meals that Vincent often burned and Dale salvaged with patient skill. They read together by lamplight, Dale working through novels while Vincent preferred newspapers and practical books about animal husbandry. They made love with a tenderness and passion that surprised them both, learning each other's bodies the way they had learned each other's languages. Spring of 1879 brought new challenges and opportunities. Their reputation had grown enough that they had steady work, but they reached the limits of what 2 people could produce. Vincent suggested hiring an apprentice, someone young who could learn the trade and help with the workload. Dale agreed, and they hired a 15-year-old boy named Jacob, who had been orphaned the previous winter and was living on the charity of the church. Jacob was skinny and underfed, desperate for work and willing to learn. He was also initially terrified of Dale, believing the rumors that she was simple-minded or cursed. Vincent set him straight on the first day. "Dale is my wife and business partner. She is smarter than you or me, probably smarter than anyone in this town. She cannot speak, but she can hear and understand everything. You will treat her with respect, follow her instructions, and learn from her. She has forgotten more about leatherwork than you will ever know. Understood?" Jacob nodded frantically. Over the following weeks, he learned that Vincent was right. Dale was a patient teacher, demonstrating techniques over and over until Jacob mastered them. She corrected his mistakes with gentle firmness and praised his improvements with real warmth. Within 2 months, Jacob worshipped Dale almost as much as Vincent did. Summer brought an incident that reminded them both how fragile their peace could be. Marcus Cole, Dale's stepbrother, returned to Fort Garland after a year's absence. He was drunker and meaner than ever, having spent the intervening months gambling away what little inheritance his mother had left him. When he saw Dale walking down the street with Vincent, her hand tucked in his arm and a look of contentment on her face, something ugly twisted in Marcus's expression. "Well, if it is not my mute stepsister," Marcus called out, his words slurred. "Heard you went and got yourself married. What did you do, girl? Trap him by spreading your legs? Only use you got since you cannot talk." Vincent handed Dale his hat and coat with deliberate calm. "Hold these, please, my love. This will only take a minute." The fight was short and brutal. Vincent was bigger, stronger, and sober. Marcus went down after 3 punches and stayed down. Vincent stood over him, breathing hard, his knuckles bleeding. "You will leave my wife alone," Vincent said, his voice carrying down the street. "You will not speak to her, about her, or in her presence ever again. If I hear you have said one word about Dale, I will find you, and what I just did will seem like a kindness. Am I clear?" Marcus spat blood and nodded, his eyes full of impotent rage. He left town the next day and never returned. Dale, who had watched the whole thing with a mixture of fear and fierce pride, kissed Vincent's bruised knuckles that night and wrote, "My champion, my love, thank you for defending my honor." "Always," Vincent promised. "For the rest of my life, always." The years that followed were good ones, full of hard work and small joys. Zimmer and Carson became known throughout southern Colorado for producing some of the finest leather goods in the territory. They expanded the workshop, adding a second room for storage and a covered area for working in summer heat. They saved their money carefully, planning for the future. In the spring of 1881, Dale discovered she was pregnant. She told Vincent by placing his hand on her still flat stomach and writing simply, "Baby, coming in October." Vincent felt joy and terror in equal measure. A child. They were going to have a child. How would they manage a baby in the business? What if something went wrong? What if he was a terrible father, like his own had been? Dale saw the fear in his face and took his hands. She wrote, "We will figure it out together, just like we figured out everything else." She was right. They prepared for the baby's arrival the way they approached their work, methodically, practically, with attention to detail. Vincent built a cradle from oak wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. Dale sewed tiny clothes from soft cotton, her stitches even tinier than usual. Mrs. Patterson, who had become a sort of surrogate mother to them both, offered advice and reassurance. The baby came on a cold October night, arriving in a rush that left them all breathless. Vincent stayed with Dale through the whole labor, holding her hand and wiping her forehead, while the midwife worked. Dale could not scream out her pain, but Vincent felt it in the way her nails dug into his palm and the silent tears that streamed down her face. Then, suddenly, there was a new sound in the cabin, the wailing cry of a newborn baby. The midwife placed the child, cleaned and wrapped in a blanket Dale had made, into Dale's arms. "A boy," the midwife announced, "small but healthy, with good lungs as you can hear." Vincent looked at his son, at the tiny red face and the shock of dark hair, and felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. Dale was crying and smiling at the same time, her whole face transformed with love as she looked at the baby. They named him Daniel Carson Zimmer, honoring Dale's father. Daniel was an easy baby, as babies went. He nursed well, slept reasonably, and seemed content to be held by either parent. What surprised Vincent most was how naturally Dale took to motherhood, despite being unable to sing lullabies or make the soothing sounds most mothers used. Instead, she held Daniel close, letting him feel the vibrations of her heartbeat, moving with a gentle rhythm that calmed him just as effectively. Business slowed while they adjusted to parenthood, but it did not stop. Jacob, now 17 and quite skilled, took on more responsibility. They hired a second apprentice, a girl named Sarah, who defied her parents' wishes to pursue leatherwork. Dale taught them both, communicating through demonstration and written instruction, proving again that silence did not mean inability. Vincent watched his wife juggling motherhood and work with awe. Dale would nurse Daniel in the workshop, then strap him to her back in a carrier she had designed and continue working. She stitched fine seams with one hand while rocking the cradle with her foot. She never complained about the exhaustion or the constant demands of an infant. One night, when Daniel was 3 months old and sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Vincent pulled Dale into his arms in front of the fire. "I love you," he said simply. "I do not say it enough. You are an amazing mother, an incredible craftswoman, a brilliant businesswoman, and the best thing that ever happened to me. I love you, Dale Zimmer." Dale kissed him, then reached for the paper she always kept nearby. She wrote, "I love you too. You gave me a life when I had none. You gave me a voice when I could not speak. You gave me a family when I thought I would always be alone. Everything I am, everything we have built, is because you saw me when no one else did. I will love you until the day I die, and beyond." Vincent made love to his wife slowly and gently that night, mindful of her still recovering body, expressing with touch what words could never fully convey. Afterward, they lay tangled together, listening to their son breathe in the cradle nearby. And Vincent thought about the strange path that had led him here. If he had not been in Fort Garland that day in June 3 years ago, if he had not seen Marcus Cole dragging Dale through the street, if he had not intervened, where would they both be now? Dale, as if reading his thoughts, touched his chest over his heart, her sign for him, the V over the heart. Vincent covered her hand with his and signed back, both hands over heart, then extended outward. Love. The years continued to pass, bringing changes but never diminishing what Dale and Vincent had built together. Daniel grew from infant to toddler to small boy, learning to communicate with his mother through signs before he even learned to talk. He grew up understanding that silence did not mean absence, that his mother spoke volumes through her expressions, her gestures, her written words. When Daniel was 3, Dale became pregnant again. This time the baby was a girl, born on a warm May afternoon in 1884. They named her Victoria Ellen, and she had her father's storm-colored eyes and her mother's determined chin. The workshop expanded again as their reputation grew. They took on more apprentices, teaching the craft with the same patience and skill Dale's father had taught her. Some of those apprentices went on to open their own shops in other towns, always crediting Zimmer and Carson as the place they learned their trade. In 1886, an opportunity arose that would change everything. A leather goods company in Denver wanted to buy Zimmer and Carson, offering enough money to secure Vincent and Dale's future and that of their children. It was tempting. They could move to the city, live more comfortably, perhaps even open a retail store. But when Vincent brought the offer to Dale, she shook her head firmly. She wrote, "This is our home. We built this together in Fort Garland. Our children are happy here. Our friends are here. Money is not everything. What we have here is worth more." Vincent felt relief wash over him. He had not wanted to move either, but he had been willing if Dale wanted it. "You are right," he said, tearing up the offer letter. "We stay." They celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary in January of 1889 with a party at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house that felt more like a community gathering. Half the town showed up, bearing gifts and good wishes. Tom Willis gave a speech about how he had been skeptical at first, but that Dale and Vincent had proven that talent and determination mattered more than any disability or prejudice. Dale stood beside Vincent throughout the party, Daniel on one side and Victoria on the other, accepting congratulations with her small sunrise smile. Later that night, after the children were asleep and they were alone in their cabin, Vincent gave Dale his anniversary gift, a new leather-bound journal, larger than the first one he had given her, with pages he had carefully selected from the finest papermaker in Denver. "For your memoirs," Vincent said. "I think you have a story worth telling, Dale Zimmer, about a woman who refused to let the world's limitations define her, about a craftsman who built a business and a family despite everyone thinking she could not, about someone who taught a foolish cowboy that listening with the heart is more important than hearing with the ears." Dale's eyes filled with tears. She wrote, "Our story, not just mine. Everything we did together." "Then write it that way," Vincent said. "But write it, please, so our children and grandchildren will know, so the world will know that they called you a burden, but you were never anything less than extraordinary." Dale did write their story, spending winter evenings filling page after page with her neat handwriting, telling about her childhood, her father's patient teaching, the loss of her parents, the cruelty of her stepbrother, and then the day a cowboy she did not know stood up for her and changed everything. She wrote about learning to trust, about building a business from nothing, about falling in love with a man who saw past her silence to the person underneath. She wrote about the joy of motherhood, the satisfaction of creating beauty with her hands, the peace of building a life with someone who understood her completely. Vincent read the pages as she completed them, often with tears streaming down his face. He had not fully understood, he realized, how much pain Dale had endured before he met her. He had not comprehended the depth of her loneliness, the weight of being invisible in a world that only valued voices that could speak aloud. "You are so strong," he told her after reading about her years living with Marcus and his mother. "Stronger than I ever knew." Dale wrote, "Not strong, just stubborn, refusing to break because breaking would mean they won. And then you came, and I did not have to be strong alone anymore." As their children grew, they proved to be bridges between their mother's world of silence and the speaking world around them. Daniel, who inherited his mother's gift for working with leather, became fluent in sign language and often acted as Dale's interpreter when detailed verbal communication was necessary. Victoria, who was more interested in books than leather work, declared at age 7 that she wanted to be a teacher so she could teach other children not to judge people who were different. In 1892, when Daniel was 11 and Victoria was 8, Dale's stepbrother Marcus died in a bar fight in New Mexico. Vincent debated whether to tell Dale, then decided she had a right to know. Dale read the news with little visible emotion, then wrote, "I forgive him, not for his sake, but for mine. I will not let his cruelty have power over me anymore." Vincent held her close, marveling again at his wife's capacity for grace. She had every right to hate Marcus Cole, but she chose instead to let go of that burden. It was, Vincent thought, the final severing of ties to the woman people had once called a burden. Dale Zimmer was nobody's burden. She was a successful businesswoman, a skilled craftswoman, a loving mother, a cherished wife, and a valued member of the Fort Garland community. The business continued to thrive through the 1890s. They moved to a larger workshop in 1894, one with proper glass windows, a modern stove, and enough room for 6 people to work comfortably. Dale oversaw the design work while Vincent handled the business side and the heavier construction. Their apprentices, now journeymen in their own right, produced work that met the high standards Dale had set. Daniel, showing the same talent his mother and grandfather possessed, began taking on more complex projects at age 14. He had his mother's patient hands and his father's business sense, a combination that promised well for the future of Zimmer and Carson. Victoria, true to her word, became a school teacher, though she helped with the business bookkeeping in her free time. In 1899, Vincent and Dale celebrated their 20th anniversary. They were 42 and 39 years old, respectively, their faces weathered by sun and wind, their hands scarred by decades of leather work. But when Vincent looked at his wife, he still saw the young woman with amber eyes who had written her name in the dirt and changed his life forever. They took a rare vacation that summer, traveling to Denver with their children to see the sights and stay in a proper hotel. Daniel, 16 and nearly as tall as his father, marveled at the city's size. Victoria, 13 and already showing signs of her mother's quiet determination, declared that she preferred Fort Garland. On their last night in Denver, Vincent and Dale walked alone through the city streets, their children safely back at the hotel with a chaperone. Dale had aged beautifully, Vincent thought, her dark hair now threaded with silver, her face lined with laughter and sun. "Do you ever regret it?" Vincent asked impulsively. "Tying yourself to a drifter cowboy who punched your stepbrother?" Dale pulled out the small notebook she still carried everywhere and wrote, "Never. Not for one single moment. You gave me everything, Vincent. A voice, a purpose, a family, a life worth living. My only regret is that I cannot tell you aloud every day how much I love you." "You tell me," Vincent said, his voice rough with emotion. "Every day, in 1,000 different ways. The way you smile at me over breakfast. The way you touch my hand when we work. The way you sign my name. I hear you, Dale. I always hear you." They kissed under the Denver streetlights. 2 middle-aged people who had built something extraordinary from nothing, who had proven that love required no voice, only an open heart. The 20th century arrived, bringing changes to Fort Garland and the world beyond. The Wild West of Vincent's youth was fading, replaced by railroads and telegraph lines and a creeping modernity. But Zimmer and Carson adapted, as they always had. They began producing leather goods for automobiles, that new contraption that was slowly replacing horses. They shipped products across the country, their reputation for quality preceding them. In 1905, Daniel married a young woman named Catherine who had come west from Pennsylvania. Dale approved of her son's choice, communicating her blessing through signs and written words that made Catherine cry happy tears. The wedding was large and joyful, a celebration of family and community. Victoria, ever independent, decided not to marry, but instead devoted herself to teaching and advocating for children with disabilities. She had watched her mother overcome the world's prejudice and determined to help others do the same. Dale could not have been prouder. In 1909, Dale became a grandmother when Daniel and Catherine had a son they named Vincent Dale, honoring both grandparents. Dale held her grandson and marveled at the completeness of the circle. She had been orphaned, rejected, called a burden. Now she was surrounded by family, respected in the community, the matriarch of a successful business. Vincent, holding his grandson, looked at Dale with eyes that had not dimmed in their love after 30 years of marriage. "We did all right, didn't we?" he said. Dale wrote, "We did better than all right. We did impossibly, wonderfully, beautifully well." As Vincent neared 50 and Dale approached her late 40s, they began talking about the future of the business. Daniel was ready to take over the day-to-day operations, and Catherine had proven to have a head for the business side. It was time, they agreed, to step back and let the next generation lead. They did not retire completely. Dale still came to the workshop most days, teaching techniques to the newest apprentices, working on special projects that required her skilled hands. Vincent handled consultations and maintained relationships with their longtime customers. But they also had time, finally, for themselves. They took long walks in the mountains, watching the aspens turn gold in fall and the wildflowers bloom in spring. They read together by the fire, traveled occasionally to Denver or Santa Fe, spoiled their grandchildren with the enthusiasm of people who had worked hard all their lives and earned the right to some leisure. On their 30th anniversary in 1909, the town of Fort Garland threw them a celebration. The mayor gave a speech about how Zimmer and Carson had put Fort Garland on the map, how they had proven that determination and skill could overcome any obstacle. Tom Willis, now in his 70s and mostly retired, told the story of being their first customer, making the crowd laugh with his descriptions of his initial skepticism. Dale stood beside Vincent, holding his hand, and Vincent saw happy tears streaming down her face. He squeezed her hand, their own private language of love and support, and she squeezed back. That night, alone in the cabin they had lived in for 30 years, Dale wrote Vincent a letter. It was longer than her usual notes, filling several pages. "My dearest Vincent, 30 years ago today, I became your wife in the eyes of God and the law. But the truth is, I became yours the day you stood up for me when no one else would. The day you saw me not as a burden or a curiosity, but as a person worthy of respect and kindness. You asked me once if I regretted marrying you. Let me answer again, more fully than I could in the Denver street. Marrying you was the easiest decision I ever made. You are my voice when I need one, my strength when I falter, my joy in dark times, my partner in everything. You learned my language, not just the signs and gestures, but the language of my heart. You learned to read my silences, to understand my unspoken fears and hopes, to see the truth behind my eyes. You taught me that love does not require words, only presence and patience and an open heart. We have built a life that exceeds anything I dared dream of when I was a lonely girl, being dragged through the street by a cruel stepbrother. We have a business that bears both our names equally. We have children who love us, and a grandchild to carry our legacy. We have the respect of our community and the love of good friends, but more than all of that, we have each other. After 30 years, I still look forward to seeing you each morning. I still feel my heart lift when you smile at me. I still find comfort in your arms and joy in your presence. Thank you for loving me, Vincent Zimmer. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for building this beautiful life with me. Thank you for proving that they were wrong when they called me a burden. I was never a burden. I was just waiting for the right person to see my worth. You are that person. You will always be that person. I love you more today than the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is my promise for as long as we both live. Your wife, eternally and completely, Dale. Vincent read the letter 3 times. his vision blurred by tears. Then he pulled Dale into his arms and held her. This woman who had changed his life, who had taught him that strength came in many forms, who had shown him that family was built not just by blood, but by choice and commitment and love. "I love you," he whispered into her hair, "for all my life and beyond." Dale pulled back and signed, both hands over heart, extended outward. "Love." Then she added her sign for always, hands moving in circles, endless and eternal. The years after their 30th anniversary were peaceful ones. Vincent and Dale watched their business continue to grow under Daniel's leadership. They watched Victoria become one of the most respected teachers in southern Colorado, known for her innovative methods of teaching children who struggled in traditional classrooms. They watched their grandson Vincent Dale grow from infant to toddler to young boy, and then were blessed with 2 more grandchildren, a granddaughter named Emma and another grandson named Thomas. Dale's journal, the one Vincent had given her for their 10th anniversary, was now full of their story. She had written right up to their 30th anniversary, documenting their life together with honesty and love. She showed the completed journal to Vincent one evening, then wrote, "It is time to give this to the children, so they know where they came from, so they understand what we overcame." Vincent agreed, and they presented the journal to Daniel and Victoria at a family dinner. Both of their children were moved to tears reading their mother's words, seeing in black and white the struggles and triumphs that had shaped their family. "I never fully understood," Daniel said, looking at his mother with new eyes. "I knew people treated you poorly, but reading it all laid out, seeing what you overcame. Mother, you are the strongest person I know." Dale smiled and wrote, "Not strong, just loved. That made all the difference." In 1915, as Vincent approached his 58th birthday and Dale her 55th, Vincent's health began to decline. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down that came with age and a lifetime of hard physical labor. His back ached constantly, his hands stiffened with arthritis, his breathing grew labored with exertion. Dale watched her husband grow older with a mixture of acceptance and fear. They had built a good life, a long life together, but she was not ready for it to end. She fussed over Vincent with fierce determination, making sure he rested, brewing herbal teas that were supposed to help with pain, insisting he see the doctor regularly. "I am fine," Vincent protested, though they both knew he was not. Dale wrote, "You are not fine, but you will be, because I am not letting you go anywhere. We have grandchildren to spoil and years left to live." Vincent pulled his wife close, breathing in the familiar scent of her, leather and soap and something uniquely Dale. "Years left," he agreed. "I promise." He kept that promise. Vincent's health stabilized, and though he was not as strong as he once had been, he remained active and engaged with life. He and Dale celebrated their 40th anniversary in 1919, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and friends, both old and new. It was a smaller celebration than their 30th, more intimate, but no less meaningful. That night, lying in bed with Dale curled against his side, Vincent thought about the improbability of their life together. What were the chances that he would be in Fort Garland on that particular day? What were the chances that he would intervene when so many others looked away? What were the chances that a drifter cowboy and a silent woman would build something that lasted 40 years and counting? "Fate," Vincent said aloud. It must have been fate. Dale reached for her bedside notebook and wrote by lamplight, or luck, or divine providence, or just 2 stubborn people refusing to give up on each other. Does it matter why? We are here, together, after 40 years. That is what matters. "You are right," Vincent said. "As always." Dale swatted his arm playfully, and they fell asleep intertwined, as they had been for 40 years. The 1920s brought more changes. Fort Garland, once a rough frontier town, had grown into a proper community with paved streets and electric lights. The Wild West was truly gone now, existing only in memories and dime novels. But Zimmer and Carson remained, now run by the second generation, but still producing the quality leather goods that had made their reputation. In 1924, Dale and Vincent became great-grandparents when Daniel's son, Vincent Dale, had a daughter. The baby was named Dale Catherine, honoring both grandmothers. Dale, now 64 years old, with hair gone completely silver, held her great-granddaughter and marveled at the passage of time. From burden to great-grandmother, from voiceless girl to matriarch of a thriving family, the journey seemed impossible and yet undeniable. Vincent, 67 and moving slower now, but still sharp as ever, watched his wife with the baby and felt his heart overflow. This was what they had built together, not just a business or a house or a reputation, but a legacy of love that would continue long after they were gone. In 1928, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. It was a major event in Fort Garland, with the mayor declaring it Dale and Vincent Zimmer Day. The celebration was held in the town square, with speeches and music and a cake that took 3 women 2 days to bake and decorate. Vincent and Dale sat in places of honor, holding hands as speaker after speaker testified to their impact on the community. Tom Willis's son spoke of the business lessons his father had learned from them. Former apprentices talked about the skills and values Dale and Vincent had taught them. Victoria spoke movingly about growing up with a mother who could not speak, but communicated more love than 1,000 words could express. Finally, Vincent was asked to say a few words. He stood slowly, his joints protesting, and looked out at the crowd of familiar faces. Then he looked down at Dale, his wife of 50 years, his partner in everything, and smiled. "Most of you know that Dale cannot speak," Vincent said. "What you might not know is that she taught me a truth it took me 23 years to learn, that the most important communication happens without words. Dale speaks with her hands, her eyes, her heart, and I learned to listen with mine. 50 years ago, I was a drifter with no purpose and no home. Then I met a woman the world called a burden, and everything changed. Dale was never a burden. She was a gift, one I spent 50 years trying to be worthy of. We built a business together, raised a family together, grew old together. And through it all, she has been teaching me how to truly see people, how to listen to what is not said, how to love without condition. People ask me sometimes if it is hard, being married to someone who cannot speak. I tell them the truth. It is the easiest thing I ever did. Because Dale and I understand each other in ways that go deeper than words. We speak the language of the heart, and in that language, we are both fluent. So thank you all for celebrating with us today. Thank you for accepting Dale and me, for supporting our business, for being our friends and neighbors, and thank you, Dale, my love, my wife, my heart, for 50 years of teaching me what really matters. There was not a dry eye in the square as Vincent sat down, and Dale took his face in her hands and kissed him, a kiss that spoke of 50 years of love and partnership and unbreakable commitment. That night, alone in their cabin, Dale wrote Vincent one more letter. My dearest Vincent, 50 years, half a century. It seems impossible that so much time has passed, and yet not nearly enough time for all the love I have for you. You said today that I taught you to listen with your heart, but you taught me something equally important, that I had value. Before you, I believed what everyone told me, that I was less than, that I was a burden, that my silence made me worthless. You proved them all wrong. You saw me, really saw me, when no one else would. You learned my language, not because you had to, but because you wanted to know me. You built a life with me where I was not just tolerated, but celebrated, not just accepted, but loved. We have had 50 good years, Vincent. Years full of work and joy, struggle and triumph, sorrow and deep happiness. We raised children who are good people. We built a business that has supported dozens of families. We proved that love does not require words, only commitment and compassion and 2 hearts that beat in harmony. I do not know how many more years we have together. We are both getting old, our bodies wearing out after lifetimes of hard work. But I know this. Whether we have 50 more years or 50 more days, I will spend every moment grateful that you chose me, that you stood up for me, that you loved me enough to learn my language. You are my voice, Vincent, but more than that, you are my heart, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond. Yours, always and forever, Dale. Vincent read the letter with tears streaming down his weathered face. Then he carefully folded it and placed it in the box where he kept all of Dale's letters to him over the years, tangible proof of a love that transcended words. The years after their 50th anniversary were slower, quieter. Vincent's health continued to decline, and Dale's joints ached with arthritis. They no longer went to the workshop daily, content to let Daniel and his children run the business. They spent their days in gentle routine, breakfast together, reading, short walks when weather permitted, visits from grandchildren and great-grandchildren. In the spring of 1932, Vincent fell ill with pneumonia. He was 75 years old, and his body no longer had the strength to fight as it once did. The doctor was frank with Dale and the children. Vincent might not recover. Dale refused to leave Vincent's bedside. She sat with him day and night, holding his hand, wiping his fevered brow, communicating her love and determination through touch. Daniel and Victoria took turns sitting with them, keeping vigil as their father fought for his life. On the third night, when the fever was at its worst, Vincent opened his eyes and looked at Dale with sudden clarity. "Remember the day we met?" he whispered, his voice hoarse and weak. "You wrote your name in the dirt. Dale Carson. I thought you were the most courageous person I had ever seen." Dale squeezed his hand, tears streaming down her face. She reached for her notebook with her free hand and wrote, "I remember everything, every day, every moment with you." "Good life," Vincent said. "Best life. Thank you for choosing me, Dale. Thank you for teaching me your language." Dale shook her head and wrote, "Thank you for learning it. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for 54 years of love." Vincent smiled, that gentle smile that had first made Dale's heart flutter 54 years ago. "Love you," he breathed. "Always." Dale pressed her forehead to his, signing against his chest, both hands over heart, extended outward. Love. Eternal, boundless love. Vincent recovered from the pneumonia, defying the doctor's predictions. He was weaker afterward, more fragile, but alive. Dale nursed him back to health with the same fierce determination she brought to everything, and slowly Vincent regained his strength. They had 5 more good years together, years of watching their family grow, of sitting together in comfortable silence, of communicating without words in the language they had spent a lifetime perfecting. They celebrated their 55th anniversary quietly, just family, with stories and laughter and the warm contentment of people who had lived and loved well. In the winter of 1937, Vincent passed away peacefully in his sleep, lying beside Dale as he had for 58 years of marriage. He was 80 years old, and he died content, surrounded by family, secure in the knowledge that he had lived a life of purpose and love. Dale, 77 years old and suddenly alone for the first time in nearly 6 decades, grieved deeply. But she did not break. She was still Dale Carson Zimmer, still the woman who had survived rejection and cruelty, still the craftswoman who built beauty with her hands, still the matriarch of a family that loved her fiercely. She lived 4 more years after Vincent's death, spending them with her children and grandchildren, teaching the youngest ones the sign language she and Vincent had developed together, ensuring that his memory stayed alive. She worked in the workshop when her hands allowed, producing a few final pieces that were among the finest she had ever made. In the spring of 1941, Dale passed away quietly, sitting in her rocking chair on the porch of the cabin she and Vincent had shared. She was 81 years old. Her family found her with a peaceful smile on her face, and Vincent's last letter to her clutched in her hands. Daniel and Victoria buried their mother beside their father in the Fort Garland cemetery, under a headstone that read, "Dale Carson Zimmer, 1860-1941, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She spoke with her heart, and he learned her language." The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, family, former apprentices, customers, friends, people whose lives had been touched by Dale's quiet strength and determination. Victoria gave the eulogy, speaking of a mother who taught her that disabilities were only limitations if you let them be. That silence could be powerful, that love required no voice. "My mother could not speak," Victoria said, her own voice strong and clear. "But she taught me more about communication than anyone I have ever known. She taught me to observe, to listen deeply, to understand that people express themselves in many ways. Most of all, she taught me about love, about the kind of love that sees past surface differences to the person underneath, about the kind of love my father showed her when he chose to learn her language instead of expecting her to change. They were partners in the truest sense, equal in all things, bound by a love that transcended words. And though they are both gone now, their legacy lives on in this family, in the business they built together, in the community they served, and in every person who learned from their example that true communication happens heart to heart." Zimmer and Carson continued for another generation before being sold to a larger company in the 1950s. But the name lived on, and the reputation for quality that Dale and Vincent had established remained. Their descendants spread across Colorado and beyond, carrying with them the story of the silent woman and the cowboy who learned her language. Dale's journal, the one Vincent had given her, was preserved by the family and eventually donated to the Colorado Historical Society. It became a valuable primary source for historians studying women's experiences in the Old West, disability rights, and the evolution of small businesses and frontier communities. But more than that, it became a testament to love, to partnership, to the power of seeing and valuing people for who they truly are. The cabin where Dale and Vincent lived stood empty for a few years after Dale's death, then was converted into a small museum dedicated to their lives and work. Visitors could see examples of their leatherwork, read excerpts from Dale's journal, and learn about two people who proved that limitations existed only in the minds of those who imposed them. On the wall of the museum hung a framed piece of paper, the words written in Dale's neat handwriting. "They called me a burden because I could not speak, but Vincent learned my language with his heart. He taught me that I was never a burden, only misunderstood. Together we built a life that proved love requires no voice, only an open heart and the willingness to truly listen. This is our story, and it is a story of hope, of perseverance, of finding home in another person's acceptance. May everyone who reads it remember, the most important conversations happen without words, and the truest love sees past what a person cannot do to celebrate everything they can." And so, their story ended as it began, with a truth spoken from the heart, that Dale Carson was never a burden, and that Vincent Zimmer's greatest achievement was not the business he built or the family he raised, but simply that he saw her, truly saw her, and loved her for exactly who she was. Their love story became legend in Fort Garland, passed down through generations, a reminder that the Wild West was not just about cowboys and cattle drives, but also about ordinary people who did extraordinary things, who built lives of meaning and purpose against all odds, who proved that love, in the end, always finds a way.